Later, this same female police officer, she informed Banaz's father that she had raised this complaint against him, which, of course, ran horrendous risk of placing her even worse in danger than she had been before.
They went to her home to interview her in front of her family, and taking a statement of a woman that she's complaining against her own family in front of her family is just ridiculous.
It was a real failure of education, if you like, failure of training, and it was a shame in a police officer to find that. I think the hardest thing was that when she actually gave evidence, she was determined, as much as she could, to stick by her original account, and she wouldn't even... maybe it's difficult, because if you're a police officer, it's hard to stand up in court and say, maybe I got that wrong. It's hard, isn't it? On the other hand, it was clear she had got it wrong.
After Banaz came out of hospital, she went and stayed with Ramat very briefly, but was then persuaded by her family to come and meet them at that McDonald's in Tooting, to persuade her to come home. Banaz had said something along the lines of, you know, if I run away, I'm dead. If I go home, I'm dead. You know, so that sense of absolute futility, which goes some way to explaining her decision to go home.
She didn't believe that her family would kill her. She thought that her mother can be someone that can help her at home and not let the other to harm her. She didn't thought about that her mother herself, she is a weak woman that cannot save her.
Shortly after their relationship was detected, Banaz and Ramat attempted to break up. It didn't last. They weren't able to keep away from each other, so the relationship continued despite them both at this stage knowing that they were at risk.
Ramat reported Banaz missing on the 25th of January.
If it hadn't been for Ramat, we would never have known about it. He was the person who reported her missing.
I was on call. It was my first week in charge of that team, and I had a phone call from a local detective inspector who was worried about one of his missing persons. Although it was only fairly scant detail that he was actually able to provide at that time, it was obvious from the outset that this was potentially a very serious situation.
And my job really was I was the intel sergeant, so my job was to deal with all the intelligence that we gathered.
I was part of Team 16 over at Lewisham, and I became the case officer. I was one of the detective sergeants.
Not a single member of the Kurdish community helped us. We didn't get any positive contribution from the community, and there must have been dozens, if not hundreds, of people that knew what had happened to Banaz. We encountered, quite a wide scale of attempts and conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. Young men who made false statements, people saying that she was alive when in fact she wasn't.
There was lots of work that went on, and lots of red herrings, lots of things where we were looking at things, and it would take us a week to eliminate that line of the inquiry.
In involving themselves in it, that's enhancing their own image within the community. There were over 50 people involved to some degree or another in that murder. I think we found out within a couple of days of the investigation that Banaz had an older sister called Bekal, who was estranged from the family. She wasn't living at the family home.
I had the police knocking on my door, asking if they could come in. And they said to me, it's about your sister. Your sister's gone missing. So when they said to me she's gone missing and my family don't know, I knew that wasn't true. I knew that was not true because I just knew in my heart that, you know, it's to do with the family members, the men. I knew it.
And in early March, someone from the Kurdish community had found Bakal, and she had had a phone call to say that she was going to be the next person to be killed. The risk to her was obviously phenomenal. We knew that people had traced her telephone, people knew roughly what area that she was living in, and we actually, moved her from house to house to house at one point, just trying to keep her safe, to stop people finding her. This is a letter that was delivered by Banaz to her local police station on or around the 12th of December 2005. In it, she has given details of people that she has heard were going to be responsible for killing her. Numbers 2, 3, 4 and 5 have said that they're ready and willing to do the job of killing me and my boyfriend, and this was said by my uncle Banaz Mahmood while my uncle was on the phone to my mum on the 2nd of December at around 6 to 7 that evening. He also said that he's going to kill me and my boyfriend, Ramat. And it's signed Banaz Mahmood. Just childlike writing, speaking literally from beyond the grave. This is what's going to happen to me. And from that letter, we were able subsequently to identify some of the people that she was talking about. And the letter was accurate in every detail of what she said about these men as Omar Hussein, Muhammad Ali, Mohammed Hammer. And those three men are all cousins, so they are cousins of Banaz and they are cousins of each other.
Mohammed Hammer was arrested. He was the first one to be charged.
It was a race against time. Because we had charged Mohammed Hammer, there is only a certain amount of time that you can keep someone in custody. And we still hadn't found the body. We couldn't even prove that Banaz was dead, much less that Mohammed Hammer had been the one to kill her at that point. So the race was really on to find Banaz's body. And the Mahmood family was showing no interest in this investigation whatsoever. They weren't ringing us up and saying, have you found my daughter yet? Or just absolutely no interest. Even when we were dragging the lake opposite their house, no one came out or, just no interest whatsoever. It's just such an absolute outrage that this girl is missing and nobody cares about her.
She was a completely innocent victim, and I think those things hit home, and you always do things for the victim's family. Is one thing we always, we always try and serve murders for the victim's family. With this one, we never tried to solve the murder for the victim's family. We tried to solve the murder for Banaz. Because, that she didn't have anybody else. Her family had killed her.
The two Mohammeds followed a really strange pattern of behaviour in that their telephones were showing that they were coming back down to London, toing and froing between London and Birmingham.
Mohammed Hammer's car was a hire car. The GPS, or the equivalent in his car, meant that there was a record of every place it had been, and the police just sent up a helicopter to hover around the area where the cars had been parked.
We got some information about there being a freezer over the grave. And Caroline and I were sitting there when we got this information. She went, we've seen that freezer, haven't we? And I went, yeah. We're sitting there trying to rack our brains, and she suddenly went, that's on the video. Where's the video? So we looked at it, and sure enough, it was, there's a freezer in this back garden that we see from the helicopter that I was up in. So that was it. We were like, that's got to be there. So Stuart and I got in the car and literally drove up there that night.
Once we were inside, We took with us a forensic archaeologist who looked at the ground outside in the rear garden and immediately saw that there had been a disturbance in the earth towards the back of the house.
She was in a fetal position. She was curled up in a fetal position, which is somehow, I don't know, that somehow for me makes it even worse, that fetal position representing a child, almost like a child in a womb being in that suitcase. And the whole tragedy about this case for me is about that child-parent relationship that's gone horribly, horribly wrong. That poor young woman's body in that suitcase.
I had a knock on the door and it was my family liaison officer. But she won't speak to me until I sit down and have a friend there with me, and just tears just floated out. I couldn't control myself. I wanted to just be out of my skin, just die. It was, they said to me they'd found my sister buried in a suitcase, 6 foot down, and water pipes had broken while they'd put her down there.